But Gemara, today's daf is daf nun. Now the Gemara is quite technical. So just quickly, there are four different ways of learning. One way is using it hekish, one is there's shava, and one is kavochem, and one is binyanav. So we want to know each one of them. So know 16 ways. Each one of them, if you learn from hekish, can you now teach something else via hekish, via kavochem, via shava, and all that. So what we covered so far is the four options with a hekish. And we said a hekish cannot teach with a hekish. That's what we said. We learn out from either from Rav Kasha Yurim, or we learn out from Ravina. Now remember, the Gemara is going to keep on repeating this. Rav Ravina, this names. I'm going to tell you it once, so I don't have to go through every time the whole case again. So Rav learns. Ravina says that we learn out because by Mitzayra, Sham Mitzayra, it has to give you all the details. L'chayda could have just said a hekish, but since the original Asham is only a hekish from Chata, only a hekish from somewhere else. So you can't. Chatas is a hekish from Oila that has to be in the north side. So you can't then say Asham Mitzayra from Chatas. Therefore, a hekish cannot teach a hekish. Or Rava says in Kasha Yurim that you teach about the fats have to go on the bed. Then we have, so a hekish cannot do that. A hekish cannot teach a gzeir shava either. Rabbi Yechid came along and said, because if a hekish can teach a shava, why do you need to say by Asham Shecht in the north side? Since we have a gzeir shava, kodesh kadashim from chatas, and chatas you learn from oila via a hekish. Let the hekish teach via the gzeir shava. Is a raya, a hekish cannot teach through a hekish cannot teach through a gzeir shava. But a hekish can teach through a kavochem from Tanah Rabbi Shmuel, which learned by Yom Kippur, that we say that the seir of Yom Kippur, kavochem of two animals are exactly the same. The seir of Yom Kippur, just like the seir of Avodah Zarah, they made a mistake, and the seir of Avodah Zarah you learn from a hekish from the pad helam davar shel tzibur, that what the laws of the ace. And dam and tefillah, which is that a word by a kohen, which actually it's all by par kohen Mashiach, but because there are extra words, as if it's written in par helm dovish tzibur. Remember, it says lepar, and then we say, okay, so par helm dovish tzibur is a hekish to seir helm dovish tzibur. So that's a hekish teacher that over there also applies these three. The finger has to go into the blood. There has to be enough blood in the kale and all that. And then we have a kavochem. We have two different animals. Rabbi Yeshua says, have the same dinim. Surely two the same. A goat of Yom Kippur and the goat of Helm Tzibur have the same dinim. So a hekish can turn into can teach into a kavochem. The last question was, what about a hekish can teach in through a mematzinu? We tried to bring a raya. Why do you need a pasuk by Asham? Just say, just like a chata, they're all kabbanas should be the same. And we said, no, that's no raya because that takes away chorus. Oila is kule kolin, although he gives them. So no, that will remain with a suffix. Okay, so all of them. So again, quickly, hekish cannot do hekish cannot go via gzeir shava, but a hekish can go through a kavochem from Tanah Rabbi Shmuel, and a hekish with a binyanav. We don't know. Let's go next. Now we're going to go through all the four stages, but we're going to keep on going back and forth. So just remember. So we'll just see the name Yishmael. That's what it is. So the name Ravina Rava. And we'll introduce some new names now. Starting about Nunam, we are up to here about 10 lines on the top of 12 lines on the top of the page. And actually a bit more. The last of the line is Halamed. About 15 lines on the top of the page. David Halamed with a shava. Now let's go through the stage of Gzeir shava. Ma'u sheyilamed behekish. Something that you derived via Gzeir shava, can it teach through a hekish? Okay, we're just starting right now. So something we're continuing that. Motel asked Agreement asked a very good question, and I didn't have an answer for him, but to look it up, he asked to know why in Rabbi Shmuel, but we say in davening, we doesn't mention hekish.
Yes, we just Relish just wrote something.
Oh, did he?
YG. Well, two things but it doesn't make sense here because it said, one says that it's like a gzeir shava, it's included in gzeir shava, but then this whole Gemara doesn't make sense.
I'll
have to look.
Oh, so someone gave an answer there.
And one that it's included in Binyanav, but another one says
that's not correct.
You're right, according to this. So the other one was that a hekish is more direct learning from the Raisa, from the Torah. It's not like
more like Gzeir shava.
Yeah, it's not like a directly.
Gzeir shava, you can't select a question on hekish. You could.
I'll show you.
There's only a certain number of them.
With hekish is a machlekes rishonim. There's a Rashi and Sukkah, where Rashi says in hekish you cannot make up your own, and Tosfos argues whether hekish you can make up your own or not.
I took a picture of it, but I'll look up where the
You sent it
source
to
is,
me,
because it
but they all
doesn't
sound like
say
very
it.
schwach
Yeah.
answers.
I'll post it here.
Okay, let's continue. So now, something you learn from Gzei Shavif, let's go through step by step. Can you teach via Hekish? Amar Papa. So in the future Gemara, when you're going to say from Rapapa, you'll know this is it. What's Rapapa talking about? If Gzei Shavif can then turn into a Hekish. What's the story? It's the din is that a korban chatas you cannot use mice money for korban chatas. You have to element achulin. But a shlamim, you can use your Maisa Sheni money for Chatchila. When you set the money you had in mind that this is going to be for Maisa shlamim, you can do that. Okay, you can do that. Amar Papa, how do you know that? Because we're going to have a Gzera Shava. So we're going to have a Gzera Shava shlamim from Maisa to shlamim. They can use Maisa Sheni money for shlamim. And so that's a Gzera Shava. And then we're going to learn that a Toida can also do the same thing from a Hekesh from Shlamim. So we see that Gzera Shava can turn into Hekesh. By the way, there's a big machlekes in Poskim if you're allowed to use Meiser money, Meiser money, for certain mitzvahs or not. And one of the things, it's big machlekes, whatever. So one of the things is that if you when you set aside the money, or when you this talking about Meiser money, whatever, but the idea, if when you took the money, you said, I'm going to do with my Meiser money to use for these things, then you're allowed to. If you only gave it, let's say, as ani, then you want to change it, then there's a whole problem of Hataras. If you're allowed to be mataneder when it comes to tzedakah and these things. Simultaneous. Okay, talking about it. The next positive, so that's a hekesh. Toida is compared to shlamim. Lamadul the Toida shabam and a ma'aser. So Toida, comes from ma'aser. How? Mid the ashka shlamim doesn't ma'aser. Because shlamim itself comes. Shlamim itself, you can use ma'aser shein money. And how do you know that? Shlamim gufayim and all. How do you know that? Ksiv sham sham. We have a gzeda shava of sham sham. And because it says in over chalta sham by shlamim it says we should eat over there, and it says by ma'aser money as well. You bring the shlamim l'shakish moisham. So we have a Gzei Shavah to teach you about Shlamim, and then Shlamim teaches you Toida through Hekesh. So we see clearly, according to the Papa. We see clearly, according to the Papa. But Mazutra argues. So you're going to see sometimes you say, Papa. What he argues? Because remember we said that this rule only applies to Kachim. This is, you're starting from Maisa Sheni, no Kachim. So the Mazutra says, what do you bring with Ayah? If it's not Kachim, you can Hekesh, can teach a Hekesh, everything else. It's only Kachim here. It's only Chulin. Now, that means, according to Mazutra, we look at the primary source, the origin of the whole halacha is chulin, then it's considered chulin. The 2 steps afterwards are kachim, it doesn't matter. But the Papa is going to say, who said you go after the first step, even the second step? The second step is also teaching, and that's kachim, that's called kachim. And if the din is by kachim, you can't do it, you wouldn't be able to do it. So, Omar, now this is a very interesting expression here. Omar, the one who said, did they say Lomad Kodesh or Malamed Kodesh, that every step of the way it has to be Kachim in order to be considered Kachim? No. As even if the very original was Chulin, if the second one, the middle one, that's going to teach the next one, but the second one, which is learning from the first one, is Kachim, that's called Kachim. Rabbeinu Tam says, he changes it. He says, Omale Ami Omra. Did Rabbi Ami say that? Anyway. So therefore, he argues. He says you have no raya from there. But according to the Papa, you have a raya from me that one Gzei Shavah can turn into a hekesh. Next question. So according to we've answered the question, and according to Mazuta, no, you didn't. We're still a suffix. We don't know. Next one. Dover halom Gzei Shavah ma'o sheyim Gzei Shavah. Can Gzei Shavah turn into Gzei Shavah? Now this is Ramah Chama. So when we're going to learn the Gemara every time, Ramah Chama, this is the Ramah Chama. That Gzei Shavah can make a Gzei Shavah. And what's the story there? We talk about there's 4 challahs you make by korban toida. One of them is chametz, the other 3 are matzahs. And the question is, what kind of flour do you use? Kemach, which is poor quality flour, of course, or do you use silas, which is fine flour? So in the pasuk, in one of the 3 types, it says use silas, the one that you put in the water, you scald in the hot water, and then you bake it. That one, it says that one there should be silas. Now what? That should be silas. Okay. All we know is that should be silas. Lamadnu. So all we learn out from here is that that this third kind of a challah, it has to be made out of fine flour. Okay, what about, so there's different kinds. You have challah, and you have rikikim, and you have meruvechet. So we know meruvechet is a silas. What about challah? Does that also have to be made out of silas, not kemach? Chalos. By silas, it says soil reveches chalos, and then you have chalos by the word by It says chalos matzah, so therefore we know chalos. That one also is called chalos. So they both need soilus. So we have a gzeder shava. So you learn from Rebecca the gzeder shava that you need. Now, then we have, what about the middle one? What about the kicking? So we have another gzeder shava. Matzahs. It says matzahs by the kicking. It says matzahs by chalos. So chalos itself you learn from gzeder shava, and now it's teaching via gzeder shava. So klar. So chalos menayim lemon chalos. We kick menayim lemon matzahs. So we see gzeder shava continuing gzeder shava. Comes along Ravina and he argues. So again, this is only Kudra Machama. Ravina says, no raya. You know why? Who told you that the matzahs is from that very pasuk? You know, that you're going to compare chalas, you're going to compare it to the kikim. No, there's a different place where it says matzahs. Where there's another kind where you just bake in the oven. Over there also, it says the word matzahs. And that's what you're learning from. That has to be soilus. It says this soilus. That's what you're learning has to be soilus. Nothing to do. So there's no say. So according to Rami Bachama, we have a rai they shava, and according to Ravina, you don't. Elam Rava, so Rava, I'll bring another place. I'll bring another rai Tanya. We learn. It says by the Parkay Mashiach, it says, what should you do? It's an animal where you burn it outside the base of Mikdash. It says you take the hide of the animal, you take also his flesh and everything else, and then you take also the kirboy upirsha. You take its innards and you take its dung, and you take it all outside. Melamed shemaitzi yishom. You take the animal complete, you take it outside. You don't cut it up before you take it outside. How do you know that? Because it says, "Vaitziu." You take it in one go. If you cut up in pieces, it's impossible to get in one go. It's one animal. Okay. Yochol yifen shalom. Once you take it out in one go, maybe you should burn it as well. Nema kan. It says over here, roishay krav. It says over here by Parkay Mashiach, roishay krav. But nema lahala, and it says later on by normal oila. It says by sheep, roishay krav. And what do we know the Torah says in the chum by oila malahadi into a karab? Avkana deina tuach. Now what? Once you bring it out there before you burn it, you cut it up. So we have a gzeder shava. A gzeder shava that Parkay Mashiach from an oila, a regular oila that you have to cut it up once you get there. So right, gzeder shava roishay krav. Maybe you should also strip the hide as well. Avkanami strip the hide. You should bring out the kir pirsha. You don't strip the you don't strip it. Why? How do you know that? My Talmud, how do you know that? On the public says it's pasnish that you're going to take. You can take the dung out by hand. Obviously, it's inside the innards. So just like that's inside the innards, so too the entire flesh is inside its skin. Its cover. Okay. That's it. So what do we know from there? Nothing. Or you have a gzei shava, Parkay Mashiach from a regular oila. That what? That you take the whole thing out and then you cut it up in pieces. But then we learned. Now Rebbe goes the next step. That I will be from Rebbe. Now we're gonna use another gzei shava to learn from here. But Rebbe kind of says oilu basar uperdesh by Parkay Mashiach. But nema lahal, and it says later on oil basar perdesh. Here it says here by Yom Kippur Parkay Perdesh. It says here by Parkay Mashiach oil basar perdesh malahal. They need 2 hours to behefsha. Just like over there, we said that you have to cut in pieces. And how do you know Parkay Mashiach cut in pieces? Because you made a gzei shava to a regular oila. And then now we're comparing Parkay Mashiach with the gzei shava to Yom Kippur. I've kind of do a shleib behefsha. So you see, gzei shava teaches a gzei shava. Okay, so that's according to Rav. Next, okay, double gzei shava ma'ushi yom b'kavachaymer. Okay, now you turn that into kavachaymer. Kavachaymer. It's all based on logic. I'll give you another logic, and it goes as follows. I'm going to show you which is stronger. Kavachaymer or a hekesh? Ma hekesh. She'enu melamed behekesh. We established before that a hekesh cannot teach a hekesh. How? Even the Rav and Ravina, we're not going to go through it again. Either from the Rav's way or Ravina's way, and yet melamed bekavachaymer, yet a hekesh could turn a kavachaymer. How you know that? Midatana Rabbi Shmuel, we said before. So in other words, a kavachaymer is pretty strong. Right? Even though you learned it from a hekesh, you can teach new things. A kavachem is so strong. Is gzeder shava hamelamedes behekesh? A gzeder shava that can turn into a hekesh midrab papa. A gzeder shava. We know this. Just remind you that's the case of the ma'isa that you can use ma'isa gel for toida. Right? So because shlomim you learn from a gzeder shava, and then from shlomim you do a hekesh to toida. So we see that a gzeder shava can turn into the hekesh, midrab papa. That means that what? That a gzeder shava is stronger. A hekesh can't make a hekesh, but can make a kavachaymer. But a gzeder shava, which can make a hekesh, surely can make a kavachaymer. In addition to the kavachaymer, surely make a kavachaymer. Telling you, but fine. That only works out if you follow our papa, who says that that's a shava learning. El man the lesser papa, the one who says, hey, that's chulin, that's nothing to do with kachim. What do you have to make a chinik? The ma'ikam memory, you have no raya. I'll give you another logic. I want that a hekesh, that a gzei shava can turn into kavachayim. My hekesh, a hekesh can hekesh even ravina, like we said before. Yet melaba kavachayim. How do you know that a hekesh can turn kavachayim? Mitanda would be small. So we say how powerful kavachayim is gzei de shava. Hamalamed is gzei de shava. A hekesh cannot teach its own. Once you learn hekesh, you cannot do another hekesh. But gzei shava, even though you learn gzei shava, can make another gzei shava. So gzei shava is much more powerful. Yeah, how do you know that? Midrami bacham, right? Gzei shava. Actually, why the Gemara could have just said it from Rav as well. That Rabbi just learned the bottom there by the Peresh, if you learn Par Koy Mashiach to Par and Kippurim. But anyway, you learn from Rami Bacham, which is.
Didn't disappear. Midrav also.
Oh, it doesn't.
On the side. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Actually, I was wondering the whole time why it doesn't say that. Okay. Yeah, he said Takarov. Good. Okay. So Baruch Shekvanti. Okay. Now you lose your train of thought. It's finished. So I just lost the way. Where are we? Just lost the way. Where we are?
The line, the beginning of
Is David Halam Gzei Shava, which is so powerful? Sorry. Is so surely you can teach a kavachayim. Next question. David Halam Gzei Shava, can Gzei Shava, you will be in Yanav. Teku, that we don't know. When it comes to being Yanav, we're always going to remain with Tekus. We don't have any clarity. Next. What about David Kavachayim? Something you learn kavachayim. Maush, now when you go through each step. Something you learn from a kavachayim. Can you teach with Hekesh? Kavachayim, I'll give you a logical review. I'm going to prove to you that kavachayim is stronger than the method of learning than a gzei shav. How? If you learn something with gzei shav, something that you learn from a hekesh, you cannot turn into gzei shav. Remember, you asked Kodesh Kedoshim. Why do you have to say about Asher North? There's a gzei shav Kodesh from Chatas and Chatas from hekesh. So in other words, that a gzei shav, you cannot use a gzei shav if you started out with a hekesh. Yet melamed behekesh, but yet a gzei shava can teach a hekesh. It cannot learn from a hekesh, but you can teach a hekesh. Midra papa, right? Bashlamim is kal v'chaymer halamed mehekesh. A kal v'chaymer that you can learn from hekesh, because kal v'chaymer is so strong that even though you start from hekesh, it works. Midatana debate Abi Shmuel, because debate Abi Shmuel said, like we said before, that you consider the kal v'chaymer ein adin sheyim behekesh. Then surely that you can what do you call it? That you can teach through a hekesh. This only makes sense if you hold like a papa. That you have this, that you can do that. The papa make a name, take Taka don't know. Next one. Something you derive from kavachem. Can you go teach through a gzei shava? Again, kavachem. I'll give you a logic. Something you derive from kavachayim, can you not pass it on through gzei shava? That is so weak. If you learned it from a hekesh, you cannot pass it on. In other words, chatas cannot teach osham about north because you learn from a hekesh. Yet melamed b'gzei shava, a gzei shava can teach via a gzei shava. So kavachayim midrambacham, right? We know gzei shava can teach through a gzei shava. From matzah and chalas, is kavachayim surely a lamed behekesh. That kavachayim which you could learn from a hekesh. But you start with hekesh, you go kavachayim. Kavachayim is so powerful that even though the base is a hekesh, you can learn new dinim from. And the din should tell me that shava. Surely that kavachayim should be able to turn through gzei shava. Interesting, Gemara doesn't say. What about the one who doesn't agree with Rav Chama? And if Gemara doesn't have that, so sometimes we say, and those who argue, and then we read with a take or with a question, we don't even bring that up. Doesn't here bring this another girsa. Anyway, davar halamed bekavachayim, something you learn from a kavachayim. Ma'ushi yalamed bekavachayim. Can a kavachayim then teach through a kavachayim? A kavachayim. I'll give you a logical thing. It goes as follows. Gzei shava shein lemeda behekesh. Gzei shava cannot start out from hekesh mit Rabbi Yechon. Chatas and Oshim, you can't learn bad north because it starts with a hekesh. Yet melamed b'kavachayim. Yet a hekesh can teach through a kavachayim. How you know Kedama? We just said a minute ago that a hekesh can teach through a kavachayim, which you learn from is kavachayim and halamed mehekesh. But a kavachayim that could start out from a hekesh, which is much more. It's much stronger. It can teach a new dinim even though it start out from a hekesh on a week basis. But Shmuel ain't a din sheyim kavachayim. Surely can teach via kavachayim. And the Gemara says, "Zeu kal v'chomer ben kal v'chomer." The whole basis in the first place is that what do you call it? That a kal v'chomer can teach you Shav or whatever. So heck is always based on kal v'chomers. And now we're using that as the basis, and we're going to make another kal v'chomer. That's called a kal v'chomer ben kal v'chomer. Says the Gemara, no. Ben b'noyse kal v'chomer. You know why? Because you want to learn a new thing now. What's the whole point of this? You're saying a kal v'chomer. I learned from a kal v'chomer. I want to use now a new kal v'chomer. And why are you calling it kal v'chomer? Because you made a kal v'chomer now, which is based on another kal v'chomer. But what are you trying to do? To learn a third kal v'chomer. How many kal v'chomers can you have? And Taisa says, I don't know what the problem is. Why can't you have a million kal v'chomers? What's the like the second or the third or fourth?
It's the logic.
Yeah, if it's logic, it's logic.
It's
Yeah.
like a pasuk. You have to have movement. You have to have one. You can't learn on multiple things.
Yeah. Even though the chayda, if each one is a step stricter than the one before, then what do you need 3, 4, 5 kal v'chomers? Just take the last step, which is the most chomer, go to the very first step, which is the kal, and you just have one kal v'chomer. It seems to the Gemara here because it's not directly linked. You know, we're moving the posts all the time. So therefore, it's not one kal v'chomer. Here we're talking about one inyan, and then we use that to teach another inyan. So it's like each was a separate kal v'chomer. But it seems from Rashi, there's a limit how many kal v'chomers you can have. 2 is the maximum. What the mucker they can have 2 as well. Ela kal v'chomer, the kal v'chomer is my hekesh she'enu. This is the kal v'chomer. This is the logic. We'll only have a double kal v'chomer. What? Uma the hekesh she'enu lama behekesh. A hekesh cannot turn into another hekesh. But that's not from a kal v'chomer. That is in the Ravim. The Ravina for Ravina's mucker. Yet milame be kal v'chomer can teach kal v'chomer to Rabbi Shmuel. And that Rabbi Shmuel, by Yom Kippur, didn't learn from a kal v'chomer. He learned that from his Rabbeim. Rashi says he learned that a Masayda that you can learn something, start out with a hekesh, turn it into a kal through a kal v'chomer. He's a kal v'chomer halamim hekesh, or kal v'chomer that you learn from a hekesh midatana b'shmal, which is good. Ain't a din sheyim surely can teach others kal v'chomer because kal v'chomer is so strong. V'zeu kal v'chomer ben. Why is it kal v'chomer ben kal v'chomer? Because we're going to use it to learn new things. So it's only a double kal v'chomer. The etzem halacha, and then the new halacha you want to learn. One more. Davar halamed be kal v'chomer ma'u sheyilamed be binyanav. Can a kal v'chomer then turn into binyanav? I'm going to be mitoshma. I'll find. Till now, we always say we don't know. But kal v'chomer, the whole thing is logic. Get a piece of logic. Toshma coming here. Now we have by a behema yishech, by a bird either shchita or malika. Depending, the kachim you do malika. So we want to know whether you can apply the law. Now, by an avelis oif Torah, different than an animal. An animal is a tumbling animal. If it died, a carcass, you touch it, you become tummy. You lift it, you become tummy. By a bird, if it's an oif Torah and they died, only when you eat it does it you become tummy. And we'll learn more about it in the cool places. So only when you eat it. And then you have another thing called malika. And the question is, does malika have the same status? What happens if you take an animal and you shecht it and turn out to be with teif? So you can't eat it. Is it now still metame, or do we say since you went through the process of shchita, at least it's not kosher, but it took away the tumah from it? The din is, if you did what the Torah told you to do, and it's a kosher animal, it's no longer tameh. So the question will be, and we're going to learn by a bird, it'll be the same thing. If you shechted a bird, even though it's nevelas oif Torah, it's a different method. In fact, it's kal v'chomer. Madach behema, which is so strict, and yet if you shchita, you take away, eliminate the tumah, a bird which is only tameh if you ate it, then surely what? Take away tumah. Now the question is, what about malika? Malika and shchita of a bird is a mematzini. This is machshir. This is machshir. So let's go over here. It takes away tumah here also. So we're going to have a mematzini based on a kal v'chomer. And this is going to be my daya, as we'll see. Toshma coming here, Molak, when you say for you look at it says, in a metame basically, that's it. It's Torah. Have you said no, Malika, no, metame basically. Malika is not shchita. Amar Amei kal v'chomer. I'll start a kal v'chomer. Man nevelas behema shemetam maga masa. Shchitasa mitaheres trefasa mitumasa. When you shecht it, it loses its tumah. Nevelas oif. She'enu metam maga masa. It's much weaker the tumah there. It's not metame by touching it. In addition, it doesn't have trefasa masa. Surely it should be tied if you shecht it. Now what does that do with malika? Now we'll go to the next step. What do we find by shchita that it makes it kosher? And mitaras trefosa mitumasa. If he did a proper shchita, it takes it away. Malika so too by malika, which is the same. It's very similar to shchita. Should do the same thing. So what do we see for the maid here? A mematzini based on the kal v'chomer. So we see kal v'chomer turns to a mematzini. Why doesn't he want to just say that that's a machlekes? And Abuda argues Maybe that's why he argues. He doesn't hold with this Yisod that you can take a Memetzini from Kavachim. Anyway, Rabbi Yeshe says he has another opinion. He says, Daya, you want to have a Kavachim? We have a rule that not accept Rav Tarfon that Daya lova min adin lis kinod. We learned it from Miriam. They made a Kavachim that if you assault your father, you should be 14 days. But Daya, whenever you have a Kavachim and you're learning from a weaker thing, okay, this is more severe, but you can't be any stricter than the original. So therefore, Daya love adin lis kinod. And the others disagree. Rav Tarfon disagrees, except if you unless what do you call it? It's the only time we don't say Daya living in is if that undermines the whole Kavachim. Then what's the point of the Kavachim, which we have a few times in Shas? Then even though it's Daya, we're going to go further. Otherwise, what's the point of the Kavachim? So now, Rabbi Yosef says, well, Daya can avail behema to we have a Kavachim, so the Kavachim starts with behema. Behema is only shchita, so it limits a bird only to shchita. You can't go ahead and extrapolate or expand it and say let's include Malika because Daya, the whole thing is a Kavachim. Daya. Anyway, the point for Rameir, at least we see that Memetzini, you have an answer at least for Rameir. Says you know why? To heavy, remember it's totally different. The whole basis starts from an animal which is chulin. This is not kachim. Remember, this whole sugi in the Gemara is by kachim where we have to do these rules. When it comes to chulin, a hekesh could teach a hekesh. We don't have any of these rules. So therefore, you can't bring at all a raya from here. But this is chulin. Okay, we'll stop here. The next Gemara tomorrow is, and finally, he's going to finish the sugi tomorrow. Amar Aleph is okay. What about things to learn Binyan Going the four different methods of learning? What would it then be? Okay, continue tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem, same time, even though it's